Hi, my name is Cheryl Reynolds-Young, and I want to talk to you a little bit about my learnings from the textbook in Business and Administrative Communications. My first topic is to talk to you a little bit about the author. The textbook is authored by Donna Kienzler, who is a professional emeritus of English at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, where she taught in the Rhetoric and Professional Communications program. As the Director of Advanced Communications, she oversaw more than 120 sections of business and technical communication annually. And one of my favorite chapters in this book was talking about the delivering negative messages, which was chapter 10. And sometimes we think that, yeah, everything's going great. We're never going to have to deliver any bad news to anyone. But it's important to understand that when you do have to deliver bad news, there is an art to doing so. So in those situations, it's critical to maintain goodwill, especially when we're talking about customer or client relationships. We always want to make sure that the customer or client understands that their business is important to us. And we want to make sure that they understand the reasons why we're not able to accommodate their request or do something that they would like for us to do. We want to make sure that we offer a compromise or an alternative if there is one available, because no one wants to just be told no without understanding why they're being told no. The second section is about if you need to give bad news to your boss. You first want to describe what the factors were or are that led up to that particular situation. But not only do you want to address the issue, you want to make sure that you come prepared to offer a solution to fix that situation, because your boss is going to expect you to have an option for fixing the problem. And if he or she agrees, then you want to make sure that you ask for their permission before moving forward with whatever that compromise or alternative might be. And the next section is on delivering messages or negative messages to subordinates or to peers. So we want to make sure, again, that we explain what the situation is. We want to come up with a fix for the problem, or an alternative, or a compromise. And then in this situation, especially when you're dealing with people in your workplace, you want to make sure that you get buy-in from them and that you ask for their input upon whatever solution it is that you think is necessary to implement to fix the problem. And so my learnings from this chapter can be incorporated into my personal business, but also for me to incorporate into the workplace when I need to have a crucial conversation with someone and I'm not delivering good news or pleasant news, but I want to make sure that I focus on maintaining the relationship, because that's going to be most important. The other chapter that was really insightful to me was on the communication process and understanding passive voice, how to use passive voice, when to use passive voice, what the disadvantages are for using passive voice. And the thing that was most helpful to me was that when the textbook stated that when you're going to use passive voice, that it needs to be directed at the object that it's intended to. And so that's something that's really easy to remember, and it's a quick fix. And I think that that will help me avoid making that mistake in using passive voice in those areas where I should not. And my absolute favorite chapter in the textbook was talking about interviewing, writing follow-up messages, and succeeding in the job. And this chapter was so thorough. It went through the process from beginning to end, that if I were a new person or a new college graduate, new to the workforce, that I would really focus on the tips that I learned in this chapter, because not only did it just talk about how to get the job, it talks about how to look for the job, how to prospect the job, what your prospecting letter should contain. It talked about your resume and what elements should be incorporated into your resume. It also talked about how to add a new twist to those things that might not be so positive on your resume. If maybe you've only worked in your family business, or you've been fired or laid off from the job, how to present that information in the best light instead of letting it hinder you from moving beyond that particular thing. But it also talked about interviewing mistakes and some of those mistakes that you can avoid making. So I think that had I read this chapter before I entered the workforce, it could have helped me avoid some of the mistakes that I'm sure I probably made. And so the tips that I learned from this chapter would be to be able to share this information with other young people who are just now entering the job marketplace. I can also use some of the tips for me personally. I've been on my job for more than 20 years, so I don't think that I'm going any place. But if I want to promote internally, I still have to interview for it. So some of the tips from this chapter I can incorporate into that, especially the part where, even though I'm probably going to know the people on the panel, to still send them a thank you note, thanking them for the opportunity to interview for the position. And then in terms of my personal values or qualities, I pride myself on being a person of integrity, being honest, and being a hard worker. So the scriptures that represent those personal values for me are Proverbs 12:22, where it says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. And that is my goal. I want him to be pleased with me. I want to be his delight. The second scripture is on integrity, and that's Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. And lastly, the scripture, Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for human masters. So those are my personal values, the takeaways that I learned from this course, and I want to thank you for the opportunity.